Good evening, everybody. Today we are having a very special scholar to talk to us. I will request Dr. Kavan Antunga to introduce the speaker.
I got to know Gananath must be 40 years ago, 1984, when I went to Princeton. He was professor of anthropology there. He's definitely the most senior academic from Sri Lanka. So as an introduction, I think there is not much needed of an introduction, but anyway. Gananath Obesekar is Professor Emeritus of Anthropology, Princeton University, from where he retired in 2000 after having taught there for 20 years. He obtained his BA in English Literature with a first-class honors in 1955 from the University of Ceylon and his PhD from the University of Washington in 1964. He has taught in the University of Peradeniya, University of Washington, and the University of California, San Diego. Among his numerous academic awards is the Thomas Huxley Medal given by the Royal Anthropological Institute, and which is listed as the highest honor at the disposal of the Institute. His book on Captain Cook won the Louis Gottschalk Prize in 1993 and awarded by the American Society for the 18th Century Studies. He has published over 100 scholarly articles, and among his many books, The Cult of Goddess Pattini, Chicago, 1984, Buddhism Transformed Religion Change in Sri Lanka, with Richard Gombrich, Princeton University Press in 1988, and what he considers his most significant work, The Awakened One, Phenomenology of Visionary Experience, New York Columbia University Press, 2012. His latest book, ready for publication, The Doom King, Requiem of Sri Vikrama Rajasinghe, is from which today's topic is extracted.
Friends, it's really a real pleasure and an honor to be here on this occasion. I'm sure people told me that they have sent you several versions of my text. The most recent version also I have changed. So as I go on, I change the text. You see, there's no fun if you're sticking to the same thing. Hopefully, at some point, I'll have a more standard version of what we are going to talk today. I'll just start with a brief introduction, and then my friend Kavan will show some pictures, and after that I renounce pictures and I'll start talking. One of the modern features, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. One of the features of the modern nation state is the presence of a national flag. One cannot understand the modern nation without the symbols of unity enshrined in the flag, and the flag as well as the national anthem. Some of these national anthems, like the French one, is pretty ghastly, you see, and really one wonders how one would call that a decent thing. Flags of all types are found everywhere, but not as a national flag, namely that one that symbolizes the unity of the nation. Because the nation state is a recent historical phenomenon, one could naturally expect that recency to be expressed in the symbolism of flags, even though the genesis of a particular flag might be ancient. Thus, for example, the contemporary Union Jack that expressed the idea of the British nation state came into being in 1803 when Ireland was incorporated with England and Scotland to form what is called Great Britain. Quite recent, after all. The Dutch flag is even more recent. Historically, the Dutch formed several quasi-independent states, but after it became a nation state in the modern sense, its red, white, and blue flag, based on earlier models, was formally recognized as the national flag of the Dutch Republic only in 1937. These national flags must be distinguished from what we call the royal standard, the flag of a sovereign king or ruler, also based on earlier versions. The British Royal Standard has a complicated design depicted in 4 quadrants representing England, 2 quadrants with 3 lions passant, that is walking lions, or appearance of walking, within a red field, followed by a single red lion in a golden field representing Scotland. The lion passant, or standing, or in any other pose, is found in many European countries, but also rarely with the sword in its paw, with the notable exception of Holland, that ruled the maritime provinces in Sri Lanka for 150 years. We should remember that, because that's crucial to my argument. The Dutch equivalent of the British Royal Standard, the coat of arms of the Netherlands, again based on long-standing models, contained the image of the lion with one paw raised, holding onto the sword, with its unmistakable similarity to the so-called royal flag of Sri Lanka, adopted as our national flag in 1947 or 8, I can't remember the date. Now Carwin will...
Yes, I have shown it.
You have already done that, my God, how efficient. Now, what you see here is a coat of arms of the... No, what about the British one?
Yeah,
Huh? That's the British one, you see. That is the coat of the Royal Standard of Great Britain. And you can see that we are not the only persons who are obsessed with lions. Here, so many lions are flying around, you see. I mean, you know, always there is a kind of, you may say, they are not naturalistic depictions of lions, because people didn't know lions. They didn't come from the lion country. Only your Sinhalese came from the lion country, Singapore and Agai. Anyhow, if you take this, you'll see how important for European peoples the lion is. It's not just our version, you know. So let's get to the next one. The next one is quite fascinating because it is a Dutch version, you see. Now you can see for yourself the similarities, you see. There's a lion with a sword, exactly just like our fellow. Our lion, you see. The lion with a sword, look at that, you see. And then here's a close-up of this thing. I mean, I tell you a little bit, this is a bit of an obscene lion because it has some spare parts that I would hesitate to show to a good audience. You see? Anyway, this is a lion with a sword, and that really comes from the Dutch, you see. And we have to recognize that the important thing that I'm going to stress is that many of these features, the later features, I mean, singular people had representations of the lion, but not the lion with the sword, you see. That, I'm positing, came from our friends over here who ruled our poor nation for 150 years and ruined it, you see. Okay, now let's go further for the next one. Now you can see how important this is. You see, here is the Dutch gift to Kapinamudalia, you see, from the Sinhala Low Country, you see. Now, if you look at, that's a gift given by the Dutch to Kapinamudalia, who was a very distinguished Sinhala official, again from the maritime provinces. We cannot forget that part of the equation. And you can see how close the resemblance is to our lions. We have this guy, you know, with a sword in hand. But I think there's a little bit of borrowing from Sri Lanka. You see, these looks, to me anyhow, like the Hansaputtua, you see. But that aside, this is the flag given to Kapinamudalia is very, very Dutch, you see. So then we'll go to the next one. This is the flag that is all of us are familiar with, and we have to respect it, except people like me, you see. Now you see at once the similarity with the Dutch version. You see, it really is the land, but unlike the Dutch version, which is a little bit obscene, our people have a little, slightly more decent ideas as to how to represent the land. So it's a fairly decent land with a sword, but it's unmistakable that it comes from Dutch sources, you see. Anyhow, you will notice here a very significant thing, the four corners. The four corners have been interpreted by our nationalist people as the bow leaves. Now, this is another fiction that has been imposed on the public. Now, we can quite clearly show that those are not bow leaves, but lotus buds. Come on to the next. Now, this comes, you see, from the Udapalata Desave Nelummal Kodir, very important Kodir. And it is clear that this is a Nelummala, and those corners are also Nelum buds, you see. So it seems that the national flag that we have now are not representations of the bow tree, bow leaf, but actually of the Nelummala, which people have misunderstood, and because of their private prejudices, have reinterpreted to mean whatever it is there, you see, the bow leaves and so forth, you know. So come to the next. The next is the standard Sri Lankan land from 1948 to 72.
No, 51.
51 to 72. Thank you,
1948.
Carver. Yeah.
This is from
Yeah.
51 to 72.
Yeah. So here again, you have the lotus on the four corners. You see, it's very, very clear that comes from this older tradition, you know. Okay, but we still have the singular line with the sword in hand, which is, of course, as we said, Dutch. Okay. Now we get the real thing. The real thing is the one that we all have to honor, you see, and wave the flag, because by now, in 1972, was it, Kavan?
Yes.
1972, that the earlier representation at the four corners have changed into the bow leaf. Now, in my later argument, if I have time, I'm going to show that that entails a very serious paradox, namely, how do you reconcile the bow leaf with the predatory line? As far as I can understand, the bow leaf is what we call a special kind of representation, and the bow leaf is a metonymic representation of the Buddha, you see. So we have to understand the meaning of metonymy, that is, some idea, like the bow leaf, represents another more important idea, namely the Buddha. You see, that's what you call metonymy, you see. So what you have, therefore, is a real paradox, whether we can take the Buddha, who represents the ideals of nonviolence and Maitreya, Karuna, Bhavana, all those wonderful things that we, including myself, totally believe in. Can you reconcile it with this person over here? You see, that's one of the paradoxes I want to highlight as I go on. Now, the problem here is that one of the things we simply don't understand so far is that this lion image was first represented by Brownrigg when he captured the Kandyan kingdom in March 1815, you see. And on March 2nd, 1815, there was the first formulation of what is called the Kandyan Convention. So let us switch to someone I totally dislike, Brownrigg, you see, the third governor of Sri Lanka and one of the architects of our downfall. You see, Brownrigg himself cannot be understood unless you sort of, unless you remember that Brownrigg is associated with one of the modern spies, namely John Doyle. You see, John Doyle was a master spy, and if you read Doyle's diaries, he's spying all over the place in the Candian kingdom, you see. At least he's sending his spies, not all of them are reliable, you see. Now, so Doyle's main task was to, in some sense, undermine the unity of the Candian kingdom. The way he did it is through this spy system and by flattering, cajoling, persuading some of the Disavers, the governors and so forth, by bribery, corruption, all sorts of things, to somehow or other join Brownrigg and so forth. You see? So between Doyle and Brownrigg, we have this terrible combination. Doyle, in my view, was one of the earliest representatives of the modern spy system. You know that modern spies, for example, we are quite familiar with, can have a PhD, you see, and very well trained, know all the native languages, you see, and their task is to undermine a particular nation and so forth. So Doyle is one of the first of that mode, highly educated, terribly sophisticated, knew his Sinhala, studied under the monk Karatota and so forth, you see. Now, let me get therefore to the key event. That is on March 2nd, 1815, after the Candian king was brutalized, you see, and the women were stripped of their garments, they were half naked, you see, and they were ultimately, of course, in the fate of the Sinhala king. After all of that, then you had March 2nd, where you had in the presence of all the Disavers, the major chiefs and minor officials of the Candian kingdom, and it became the official, part of what we now call the Candian Convention, though it was not fully legalized, you see. That happened on March 15, when everyone signed on the dotted line, all the Disavers and so forth. The key event is that of March 2nd, and here is Doyle's own words. The proclamation or act of settlement of the government of the Candian provinces is read in the Magul Madhur, afterwards read to the Mohottalas and other inferior chiefs, and the royal standard hoisted and the royal salute fired. So it is not the Union Jack that was hoisted. It was that first flag that we pointed out, you see, that is the flag that was hoisted. It is very clear that it was not the Union Jack. What's the rationale? The rationale, in my opinion, is not all that far to seek. What happened was the long-established Candian kings, till 1815, the long line of Candian and Sri Lankan kings was over. So from Brownrigg's point of view, we did away with one king, and now we are bringing another king, you see, and that is why the royal standard, you see. The king, as we know at that time, was George III, who was off his rocker, basically. He was called Mad King George, and the affairs of government was taken by the regent. So you see that what you have therefore here, in my view, is that when what the flag that was hoisted, not the Union Jack, but that flag, that was the flag. Now, when you hoist a flag, the convention is, if you will pardon an invention of mine, you have to de-hoist the existing flag, you see. Now, the existing flag that was dehoisted was the flag that you saw in those pictures, you see, with the lion and so forth. That was the flag. That flag was not only dehoisted, his son, Brownrigg's son, took it to Whitehall, and from Whitehall it found its way into what hospital? Chelsea Hospital, you know, and it was discovered by E.W. Pereira, and that became our national flag. But here my argument, therefore, is that a product of Kandyan kings? Nowhere is in Kandyan kings do you have that flag, you see. That's what I want to demonstrate in a while. So for the moment, we have to recognize that Brownrigg, as well as D'Oyly, never once went into the Kandyan kingdom till 1815. All their information came from spies. Brownrigg didn't have even that amount of knowledge, you see. He derived his information from D'Oyly. So whatever information that people like Brownrigg, D'Oyly had came from the maritime provinces. So you had to make a radical distinction, you see. In 1815, from the Kandyan provinces, you see, which was very, very important, you know, from the time at least of Vimla Dharmasuri I to the last king, Sri Vikram Rajasingha, the Kandyan provinces have to be distinguished, in my view, from the maritime provinces. That distinction was very clear as far as the Kandyans were concerned. So the flag, all that kind of stuff came from the maritime provinces, not from the Kandyan provinces. Now, let us get to some more interesting things. Oh my gosh, I'm going. There are other events, I'm not going to deal with them, my related ones. Now, so if Brownrigg implied that the lion flag and the sword was that of the last Sinhala king, that's the implication. But if so, it is strange that it does not appear in the wonderful eulogy of the last king, Sri Vikram Rajasingha, recorded by members of his Kavikara Madhua, you see, called Ingirisi Hatana, the English War. It's a wonderful poem. We have a complete translation of it. Not here, of course. The Ingirisi Hatana, the English War, is on the king's, Sri Vikram Rajasingha's victory in 1803 and 1804 against the British forces led by the first governor, North. And it praises the king, and there's wonderful, it's about 350 four-line stanzas. It's a long, long poem, and constantly recited by, in verse 16, 31, 32, 126, but no notion of the lion flag. So it is very strange that Ingirisi Hatana, which eulogizes Sri Vikram Rajasingha, has no reference to a lion flag. See? Plenty of other flags. Parasols, they are called. You see, parasols are mentioned all the time. Caesar of the Kandyan kings. During the war against Constantine the Tsar, you see in his another great poem, Mahahatana, you see, again we have translated much of that. There is a reference to a flag, which people were waving, you see, while they were defeating Constantine the Tsar, but it happens to be a white flag. Now we know that the white flag is the flag of Matale, and the chief of Matale is Rajasingha's older brother, Vijayapala, so who was a leading person in the war. So at this time, the flag that was raised, you see, again was not a lion flag, but the white flag of one of the very key people in that war, Vijayapala, of Godapala, that is Matale. It was called Godapala at that time. Now I'm coming to change my topic to a very, very serious business, you see, and that is, I can walk, huh? Yeah. And that is, you see, once the British came here, there is a voice of protest. A voice of protest by a very important thing called Varyapala Sumangala. Now, here's the story. Varyapala Sumangala came from up to the British on March 2nd, you see, when all these activities were going on. And Varyapala Sumangala caught up, told Brownrigg, how dare you see, lower our flag like this, you see. And he trampled the Union Jack. Of course, there was no Union Jack to trample. That's one of the problems, you see. Anyhow, the myth says that he trampled the Union Jack, you know, and then hoisted the Sri Lankan flag. Now, this is the statue of Varyapala Sumangala is now in the Maligawa premises. Now, here's a problem with statues. Once you put a statue, you cannot de-statue it. I'm inventing new words, you see. You have to, the statue, and particularly if you put a statue in a very sacred spot like the Maligawa, you know, you can't just remove it. Now, if you look at some of the British statues, you take the statue of Sir Robert Clive, absolute crook, you see, utterly venal, totally corrupt, absolutely violent, but from the British point of view, his statue is there all over the place, and however much modern scholars say what a terrible person was, particularly Indian scholars in recent writing have pointed out, it has no effect, because the statue is there, and all the run-of-the-mill Britishers will believe that he was a great guy, and so it is with my favorite Captain Cook. I've written a book on Captain Cook. On his third voyage, he burned, destroyed, and he was a kind of terrorist. But he has a beautiful statue of Captain Cook. And how much Obesekar writes about deconstructing Captain Cook, no one will believe it, because his statue is there. So if Sumangala's statue is there near the Maligawa, my telling you a story is absolutely no effect. People won't believe it. You see? Now, this is not to dismiss Sumangala. Varyapala Sumangala, Varyapala Sumangala was a very, very important figure. Not the way that he is represented in that statue. He was a very important figure in the rebellion against the British led by Kapetipola. You see, in that rebellion, you know, one of the things that they found, at least Doyle was very upset, that somewhere in July, they found that the Daladawa, you see, which was supposed to be in British custody in the Maligawa, was now in Hangruanketa in the possession of Kapetipola. And it was crowned, you see, they put a sesata on top, which is a very important term in my later discussion, a canopy on top, and encased in a golden casket, you had the image, you had the Daladawa. The Daladawa, so Doyle got very upset, you see, and naturally being a good spy, he denied it, but it is already there. And Kapetipola himself said, now, you see, we have the Daladawa, which is, of course, a symbol of royalty. No one is king unless you have the Dalada. That's an old tradition. We have that. And we also have a king, you see, the new king, the claimant to the throne, Doraisamy, who has already been consecrated, you see, and therefore is a legitimate ruler. So we have a king, Doraisamy, and we have the Dalada, and now we can lead the fight. You see. Of course, we know that the fight was a lost cause because the Daladava was then recovered by the British eventually. And Varyapala Sumangala is a wonderful story which is brilliantly described by Pauli Piris in Three Singhala. If you have time, read it. How he smuggled the Daladava from its location in the Maligawa and brought it into Maguranketa. Wonderful account in Pauli Piris. So, what really happened afterwards, we know only a little part of it. So, it seems to me very clearly that one of the things that happened was they imprisoned the monk, Varyapala Sumangala, with 25 other monks and shoved them in prison for God knows how long, and we don't know whether any one of them were executed or not. At least I don't, you see. So it seems to me you have a very fascinating problem. You have a fictitious hero that has been created and everyone believes it. We have empirical investigations of the same person, Varyapala Sumangala, who is, in my view, a kind of hero, but no one remembers him. History is not what we deal with, but what is invented, you see. Now let's get to some oops. Now I think, can we get a handle on all of this? Now remember my argument. My argument is that neither Doyle nor Brownrigg was aware, did know much about the Kandyan kingdom. In fact, Doyle's spies were in certain parts that were adjacent to the maritime provinces, but the large part of the Kandyan kingdom, Tamankadua, Uva, Vellas, all of that was terra incognita. You see, they didn't know anything about it. So we should get back, therefore, back to the Kandyan kingdom. You see, how did they represent the lion at all? I'm not saying that the lion is an unimportant figure. Quite the contrary. Sinhala people, like myself, are Sinhala people of the lion. You see, because we will deal with that paradox later. But for the moment, so there's no denying that. You see, so the lions are there, all representations of the lion. I'm saying that that particular lion that we now believe is a fiction. That's not a fiction, it is reality, but something invented in the maritime provinces with the influenced by the Dutch models. Now, so I'm going to shift ground and get to the Kandy period and try to get a handle on this from the Kandyan viewpoint. See, Kandy was divided into 9 Disavanis or provinces and 12 Rata or districts. That was standard official, you see. And the lion flag is found right down to the border of Chulaw and Putlam, a long district, Hatkorale it was called, the 7 districts, you see. And the Hatkorale flag was a lion flag that, there he is, you see. It's quite a nice flag, you know. I mean, it's not a real lion, you know, one in nature. You must remember that lion of the Kandyan people. You see, so see how different it is from that the other lions. So here is the Hatkorale flag, and then the Hatkorale was also an area where Doyley's agents were at work. You see, corruption, and we have in my forthcoming book, I'll deal with the exact nature of that corruption. You see, but not here. Now, So here you have other flags too. Some of these flags are very interesting. You have the Mayura Kodia, peacock Kodia of Valapane, and then you have in the various rata, there is one in the various rata, another flag, lion flag in the various rata, but not. The most important flag, however, is not the flag of the Hatkorale with our friend the lion. From the Kandyan point of view, the most important figure, the most important province is the Hatarakorale, which is part of the modern Kerala district. Some of the founding figures of Sri Lankan kingship, Vimaladhara Masuri the first, came from a place called Peradani Nuara in the Hatarakorale, not my old university, Peradani, I'm afraid, you see. Pity, you see. But there are so many Peradanias. And anyhow, here is the flag of the Hatarakorale Visava, Irahanda Kodia, the sun and the moon flag. Why the Hatarakorale? The Hatarakorale is the seat of the Kota kings. And HCP Bell points out the Perahara, for example, the Kandi Perahara, is led not by the Hatkorale, but by the Hatarakorale, these guys. Because that was the seat of the Kota kings. Very, very important, the seat of royalty. So, in my view, the Hatarakorale is really, from the Kandyan point of view, the most important flag. Okay, we take the next one. Now you get here some funny things going on. You have the same thing, Irahanda Kodia, but at the corner here, I don't know, I can see it. What do you have here? Carmen, what do you have here? Huh?
This one
Yeah.
here.
The back to the line in the corner. So you see, even at that time, you know, the influences, Hatarakorale was located very close, bordering the maritime provinces. So some of the flags of the Hatarakorale, we are back to the line. You know. So one of the things that I want to draw your attention is that when you have a flag, the flag does not exist by itself. You see, this is a mistake. A flag, when people had a flag, like the Mayura Kodia. The Mayura Kodia, as we know, Mayura is a peacock. But again, we are dealing with a kind of representation. The peacock is not a peacock per se, but Kataragama Deiyo. You see, it's a metonymic representation of Kataragama Deiyo. So when you have the peacock, everyone knows that it is Kataragama Deiyo. And what you think about these flags is people have stories, they have myths, they have poems. And I know most of you people must have gone to Kataragama and said your prayers there, you see. But, you know, those who are in that area would know all the songs about Kataragama. So it's not just about a flag, but about myths, stories, songs, you know. I'll give you one. Panu Barana Tanu Taruna Barana Kirana Baraning Yasate Jane Rahu Asura Asurang Yuda Odavadi Giri Rajane Munu Sayaki Adolasaki Mayura Pitavane Runu Rate Piti Kanda Katira Deva Rajane. People knew those songs. It's we, except me, you who don't have forgotten them. You see? So take in the Rattas, one of the most interesting things is the Sandakindura. Half bird, half peacock. Everyone would have known the Sandakindura Jataka. represented in beautiful poetry. Unfortunately, I don't have time to recite that one. So you see, a flag, therefore, is not a flag, but something more. Now we'll come, therefore, I think I lost my notes. Now we come to the point where a lot of people, I'm sure, will disagree with me. Back to our founding ancestor, Singapore. All of us know who Singapore is. And Singapore, as you know, is the founding ancestor of the Sinhala people. We get our name Sinhala from Singapore. Singapore in mythology was the person, was the being who killed the Singha, the lion, his father. Having killed the lion, his father, you know, he escaped with his sister, his wife, I'm also getting out of my mind, with his family into the new kingdom, you see, and founded Singhapura. How did he found Singhapura? By marrying his sister. So from that descent, you see, of Singhabahu, we, the Sinhalas, have come into being, according to the stories that we find in the Mahavansa and in part of the tradition. Now I'm going to take an unorthodox view of this whole thing. I'm going to read this one. But while the mythic origins of the Sinhalas are clear, there is no single recorded example of Sinhala kings from at least the time of Devanampiyathissa, which is the historically significant period, claiming descent from the lion. That is the very point I want to make. The lion is everywhere. We are people of the lion. But no Sinhala king claimed that descent. So yeah, that's why. If the mythic hero Singhabahu, lion limb, that is the meaning of Singhabahu, you see, there is, one would expect it to be a very important thing as far as Kandyan kings, as far as Sinhala kings are, Buddhist kings are concerned. But by contrast, there are full of references to other kings with the cognomen Bahu. For example, Vijayabahu, Prakramabahu, Bhuvanakabahu, Vikramabahu, and my favorite, Gajabahu, elephant arm. It is as if Sinhala history recognized the ancient term of the founder but deleted the lion prefix so that history may contain many Bahus without the term Singha attached to it. Why? The myth of Singhabahu is rooted in brother-sister incest and parricide. You see, you killed the Singhabahu, killed the lion, parricide, his father, married his sister. Now, it seems to me that these two acts, brother-sister incest, and particularly parricide, killing the father, is in Buddhist terms called anantarika karma, or anantarika karma, one of the 5 heinous sins for which one can spend a near eternity in hell, the closest the Buddhas got to a notion of eternal damnation. Not quite. You come back eventually. No Sinhala king would wish to be associated with that because of this anantarika papa karma, you see, unforgivable sin of parricide and incest, you see, because of vas. Vas is poisonous effect or terrifying consequences that can be loosely translated as sacrilege. Instead, most Sinhala kings, right down to Sri Vikrama, the last king, claim descent from the sun, Surya, which is a Vamsa on the dynastic lineage. Now that has vanished, but anyhow, it doesn't matter, you see. Surya is, of course, the flag of the Hatarakorale, of the Kandyan king, of the Kota kings. Instead, you see, not only that, not only did the kings claim descent from the sun, just like the Kota kings that we spoke of, you see, descent from the sun, but we know the sort of mythic history or Vamsa is that the Mahasammata, the great elect, the very founder of human beings, was also a member of the Surya clan, and so was the Buddha. So the Surya clan was really sort of such a crucial thing, and hence the significance of Kota kings who not only claimed descent from the sun, but also employed the sun and moon flag as their main symbol, even with a little bit of corruption there. Much of my preceding account will no doubt be contested by many here, but who knows what the truth is, but I think mine is. Therefore, it is a mistake to assume with a distinguished scholar like Paul E. Pyrrhus, whom I admire, and that the lion flag was a national flag of the three Sinhala. We pointed out that that flag came from the Low Country and the maritime provinces. So, three Sinhala was, of course, a crucial concept. The Sinhala kings never recognized the right of conquest of the maritime provinces. They simply did not accept it. By the Portuguese, by the Dutch, they never recognized that they were the Sinhala kings recognized. That was part of the three Sinhala. You see. So, for much of this was not achieved in practice. The three parts of the Sinhala, which you know was Rajarata, later called Petirata, Mayarata on the western side, and Runa, very crucial because Runa kings were, Runa was a center of resistance among local kings also, you see. So it's a very important distinction. So you have then, I'm trying to say, what was crucial for kings who want to publicly proclaim their sovereignty was not the flag, not the lion, but the white umbrella or parasol or canopy, which in Sinhala we call Sesata. The Sri Lankan kings, you see, had to have this Sesata as embodying their kingship. I have a long account of it, and I'll just give you a brief summary of one or two instances. A good place to start is with Duttagamanu, Duttagamani Abaya, 161 to 137 BC, the national hero of the Sinhalas, who after defeating the Tamil kings, ruled over Lanka under a single parasol, which, as Geiger says, could be rendered as single sovereignty. Duttagamanu also refers to the Devata of the parasol. You see, not only had he this parasol, the Kude, Muthukude, or whatever you want to call it, but the parasol had a Devata as a guardian. The idea of the parasol, of a Devata guarding the parasol, very important idea, is recorded as late as the 13th century in the Pali text, what we now render as Attanagalu Vamsaya, about the pious and short-lived king Upatista II, who lived only for 1 year. Good kings don't last long. When the king was sunk in deep vipassana meditation, he attained his arhatship, and this powerful event in turn produced an uproar in the earth and the sky, and the king himself became alarmed. Whereupon, the text says, the goddess presiding over his state canopy calmed the king's anxieties. So it seems that the goddess presiding over the parasol or umbrella or canopy seems to be an idea of the long run in Sinhala Buddhist history. Sometimes, as in my major article, which I won't deal with here. Sometimes Buddha statues were then covered with a parasol. You see, kude. So it is a parasol. Prakram was a beautiful example of that. Wherever he went with a parasol, you see, the white parasol. Now, sometimes, very often, that is, in other words, a sovereign king, you see, had to have this parasol, or sesata as they call it. Now, what often happens is that those who aspire to be a king, or those who forge a document, we are quite familiar with that here, and try to be a king, would also have a parasol. And a beautiful example of this comes on the Saladini, Rahula Saladini Sandhu is verse 28, which I translate. Here it goes about Sapumal Kumarya, you see, the conqueror of Jaffna. Sapumal Kumarya was sent by King, the last king to unite the three Sinhala was Prakram the sixth. He sent Sapumal Kumarya to Jaffna, and verse 28 says, riding his black horse as befits the sun god, under a shimmering white parasol, Sesata, and decked in precious stones. He who arrived with his powerful army after the conquest of Jaffna. Behold, O bird, the bird, you see, Saladinia, the arrival of Commander Prince Sapu. Bala Sapumal is referred to as Bala Sapumal Kumara, you see. Please watch, tells the bird, look at Sapumal Kumara in his black horse, Neela Turanga, meaning black horse. So it seems that you can now, I just want to conclude, I think, I'm not sure whether I have more time? Yes. Yeah. You see, so I want to conclude, or point out that this idea that you don't recognize the maritime provinces as a separate entity. They were the part of the three Sinhala, however unrealistic it was. We know, of course, realistically, the maritime provinces, except the very south, Gaul and Mathura, which was entirely Buddhist, you see, maritime provinces were pretty much part of the Portuguese, who gifted it to Philip II, then the Dutch, and for a short time, British. So you see, while that is true empirically, no Buddhist king, no Kandyan king recognized it. Take the case of Kirtisi Rajasingha, one of my favorite Nayaka kings, you see. Kirtisi Rajasingha, who ruled in 1747 to 1782, quite a long reign, you see, attempted to take over Dutch territory, you see, in 1762 or 61. Went to war. He was enormously successful at once, in the first place. Enormously successful. He had a very important general called Galagoda, you see, Disava Galagoda, and Disava Dumbara, you see. Galagoda went down south, and there are wonderful descriptions of Galagoda, who was really like a modern person. He had guns, cannons, all sorts of things, you see. And he gave the Dutch a hell of a hard time. But the point about this is, however much that is the case, in all of these, you see, in the long run, the superiority of the Dutch arms, you see, is such that ultimately what happened is the Dutch came, under Van Eyck, one of the crude kind of governors that the Dutch had, and in 71, 72, led an expedition into Kandy. You see, the king, K.T.C. Rajasinghe, fled, you see, into Uwa. That's where they go, you see, Hangarankata, Uwa. And then what happened was repetition of history. It happens all the time, you see. Armies come here, they destroy the Maligaon. That's the first thing they do, you see. Now, don't imagine that the Dutch were very liberals in their own country. They were not liberals in other people's countries, you see. They destroyed the Maligaon. The king tried to rescue as much as he could of the precious things in the Maligaon, But some he couldn't, he had no time. He withdrew into the provinces, and they destroyed all of that. Then the next important town from Kandyan kings was Hangarankata, which was very important. That was razed to the ground. Exactly what the British did in 1802. Exactly what the British did. Now, an interesting thing appears here. When this kingdom was destroyed, then there is a resistance. You see, Kandians, long before the term guerrilla appeared in Spanish discourse, guerrilla fighting was very well known and fully established in Kandian warfare. That's what they did. So when these armies came here, you had these Kandians, you see, who nicely persuaded them to come into wet season, where all the leechers were at war, not, you see. So what you have, therefore, in this warfare, nicely planned, and of course, from a distance, they went on firing their Korituaku guns, you see. Now, the Dutch and later the British interpreted, why are they wasting their ammunition? You see, they were just firing. Didn't realize that it was to scare the hell out of them, and very successfully, you see. So between leechers and all that terrible things that were happening, the Dutch had no choice but to retreat. Now, on the retreat, what is here? People were shouting and saying, Keribas Kaneaku, beef eaters. This brings to a very, very important thing about both the maritime provinces and our problematic modernity that we have, not me, but most of you have inherited. You see. Namely, you see, for the long history of Buddhism, Kandian kings never touch beef. This is considered the worst, one of the worst of the worst crimes. Not that they were vegetarian. Kandian kings ate meat from the hunt, dadamas, with the Vedda supply, you see. But eating beef, and to some degree pork, you see, was considered beneath contempt. So during warfare, what you have is this Kandian guy saying, Gerimas Kaneaku, beef-eating wretched people. What do you have with modernity? All of us eat, not me, all of us eat this awful substance. She's saying something. Huh? All right, what is happening is when the Kandian kings were fighting, waging their war, you see, and they were challenging the invaders, the thing they said was beef eaters, kerimas, those who eat beef. And when the Sinhala Laskarins were also there, that is, Sinhala armies under the maritime provinces were there, They shout at them, how can you do this? You are eating with these beef eaters, you see. So beef eating in the history of history of Sri Lanka has been totally taboo substance. As I point out, it is not that they were vegetarians, they were not. You see, they ate, at least the Kandyan kings, ate beef from the hunt, you see, which were supplied by professional Vedas. That is one of the rules of the Vedas. They were not Aborigines. There's a lot of nonsense that's circulating, you see. There are no Aborigines in Sri Lanka. I am an Aborigine, and most of us are Aborigines at some point, you see. So the point is that look at the complete transformation, you see. That which was considered taboo, horrible, completely normative, you see. All of us, except yours truly, eat garimas. Many of us love it. You go and we encourage our children to go to McDonald's and eat that awful thing, hamburgers. God knows what they put into that awful thing. Kids lie in the street to eat this goddamn garimas, you see. So think of the transformation. I'll leave that thought with you and hope that you will sort of refrain from garimas. Not that it will have any effect at all. So let me conclude this. I think I have lost my notes. So that's all right, you see. That's not the end of the thing, but I just want to say that parts of my discussion, which I cannot deal with here, is I point out one of the things that have happened in our society is that the disrespect of the Buddha, you see. I mean, the point about the traditional Buddhism is that the Buddhism has to be practiced in a vihara. The vihara in my childhood was recessed from the village. With modernity and crowding, you can't help it. But still, the tradition exists that the Buddha has to be propitiated, worshipped in a vihara. And the idea behind, and when you offer gilampasa, or if you offer flowers, you have to offer flowers because you know that flowers, so to speak, are fade. And that's a Buddhist idea. You see, why you offer flowers is because in my childhood, we were taught this. Pujemi buddhang kusumena nena punyena metena chautumukkang puppam milayati yatrahi dhamme kayo tatayati vinasabhavam. Now even in temples there are plastic flowers. And in the new, now one of the most disconcerting phenomena is that everyone is putting Buddha statues all over the place, not in viharas, but in my village, near the where the dogs shit and where there are people, there are near lavatories, they have put a huge Buddha statue. To me, what has happened to our people? No, that's enough. I'll stop.